Alright, we're back with more NBA coverage. In this one, I'll be covering a few of the general developments that have taken place over at least the past week and some change, just to take a brief detour from all of the playoff action, which has still delivered, at least for the most part, with a couple of these teams at this point. And there is, in that sentiment, no better place to start than the fact that SGA won another MVP, making him the 14th player all-time to win back-to-back MVPs and also the 5th guard to win multiple, as he goes back-to-back like he does at the free throw line when he doesn't make a shot and draws contact. Back-to-back like the amount of times you'll see him constantly laying flat out on the ground and constantly on these reviews, having him be called out for all this random stuff when it comes to fouls. Look, all those things can be said about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and some of that stuff does tend to look very egregious, if I do say so myself. The thing is, when you still have a player doing as much as he does, even go back to what I was talking about when I said that, Bam Adebayo had himself a fucking 83-point night when Shai Gilgeous could only muster up a 55-point ball game, being his current career high still to this point. If you're just going to constantly throw out the argument of free throws, this, and all of the lack of scoring attributes that you may believe he doesn't possess because of seeing him constantly get to the free throw line, you're just missing a severe amount of context here. As I already made the argument when it came around to that, dude, he's not playing in a lot of these fourth quarters. And when he does play in these fourth quarters, if these games aren't blowouts with how great this team has been in terms of getting teams up and out of there in the first three, due to how dominant they are, in tight battles, he's still the one that they look to get the ball in his hands and just dominate at a high level. Whether it be him controlling that aggression to get to the free throw line or controlling that aggression to get into the mid-range area or use his footwork in close spaces to get to the basket. He can do all of that inside the three-point line especially. That's where he does most of his damage. And everyone in that arena, by the time he has taken at least a couple steps and gotten into triple threat stance, they know where this is going to go and they still can't stop him. That's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a nutshell. He's still getting the ball, and he's still such a great clutch time scorer that he won Clutch Player of the Year earlier in the award season as well. Then you get into all of the free throw shit and everything of that sort. You still have to find a way to consistently do this for a full 82-game season. And even with SGA this season missing a lot of action, at least akin to the same amount that he missed in 2022-23, where he honestly got on such a great rise as a player overall, you still can't knock something like this, because it's been circulating around, and when you hear it, it's virtually no surprise why he ended up getting the award. Not only did he win back-to-back MVPs, and not only did he get Clutch Player of the Year, along with an All-Star appearance, this man is now working on 4 straight seasons, as of the recording of this video, at least in the regular season, 4 straight seasons, with at least 30 points per game, and also 50% shooting. Hell, over 51% shooting if we're using that qualifier. The only other player to do that in NBA history is Michael Jordan. And everybody knows where they stand when you talk about Michael Jordan in this day and age. Everybody knows where they stand. There's no question that he is at least the GOAT or the second best player, depending on who you ask, in NBA history. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, just getting into his prime, is doing something we haven't seen since MJ? Oh yeah. He's as good as got the MVP award secured. There was no question about it the second it was announced. Even though things were very convincing, and in the future, when you hear what Victor Wembanyama said about defense needing to be factored in to things a little bit more in terms of the conversation of the race, that is something that can change in years to come. But as it currently stands, when you have somebody being as dominant as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander offensively, and he still does contribute at a high level defensively as well, one of the better two-way players in the entire league, you can't be surprised as to how he gets this award in his trophy room, yet again, for the second straight season. And not to mention, while he also scored 31.1 points per game, he actually averaged a career high in both field goal percentage with 55% shooting from the field, and also three-point range with 38.6% shooting from deep, or at least the highest he's had in this span of consistently being looked at as the focal point on the offensive side of the basketball. So he is still actively improving in different ways as a player and as a versatile threat, while giving you that night in and night out. Consistency matters. And to do that for a full season speaks volumes to where he is at currently in his development. And again, still, he has just gotten into his prime. He can still elevate and he can still produce like this for years to come. That is a scary, scary sight. You consider him obviously being a part of the Clippers and then being sent away in that infamous Paul George trade. Nobody was expecting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to come about in this manner. Yet here we are in 2026, and he is quite literally one of the best players in the NBA. And regardless of what you want to hold against him, you can argue with a wall. The contributions don't lie. The impact that he has on the team, a team that around him is also constructed very well under Sam Presti. He still has as great of an impact as anybody in the NBA. And it displays itself when it matters the most. So, a number of different criteria can be used in terms of deciding who would be an MVP. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander happens to check most of those boxes. And you can also kind of like take a dig at the 65 game rule a little bit with all three of these players, in Gilgeous-Alexander, Wembanyama, and Jokic, for a while being in danger of actually losing their stronghold on this. At least, you had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander beat it by 3 full games played. So that didn't end up being much of an issue by the end of the season, but it could have gotten incredibly crazy. I mean, that's just like, man, you don't want to see one of the better seasons out there go to waste because of injuries. Jokic is a similar conversation where, okay, you have a player averaging a triple-double for back-to-back seasons. And again, as the notion had been gone for at least the past couple of years now, and some change. Like, these are historical seasons that all these players are putting up. And it's not to take away from what any one of them are doing, but the decision is truly difficult. Luckily for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he has, again, maintained enough to still beat any kind of voters' fatigue, at least for now, and notch himself another one. It could be something to watch out for in terms of having that settle in like future MVP races. But for now, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, from one of the raw prospects in NBA history to now being a back-to-back 2-time MVP and multi-time All-Star. And as we'll get into later, yet another appearance on the highest level of all NBA teams. Just a true assassin on the court. Every single day he's out there. And every single moment that he does step foot on the floor, the Thunder fans know that their chances of winning are through the roof. Especially when he is playing at that level. Because you can't stop him. Either, again, he's getting his in some fashion. And I get that it can be annoying a little bit to see him get to the free throw line. Yet at the same time, again, he isn't even the league leader in terms of free throws made or attempted. Not even close. Also, in terms of efficiency, like, he does have a pretty good level of it for the volume that he takes. Still, it doesn't even compare to guys like Luka Doncic who have far more taken this season than he does. So that narrative, again, it can get, blown up, but it can also get tired really quickly. Like, he isn't even the highest beneficiary of it. And that's how you know that, again, he's in ways a step above most other scorers out there. He can truly do it from anywhere on the floor now, even if he's not necessarily taking threes at a high clip. You can expand his range a little bit, and he'll still beat you. You can turn him into a passer, and he'll still beat you. He rarely finds himself in scenarios where he's turning the ball over at a high level. And up to this point, the fact that he has averaged 30 points per game over the past few seasons, past 4 in a row, you would expect him to be averaging damn near 5 turnovers a game. Instead, these numbers have damn near decreased on a season-to-season basis. And he hit as low as 2.2 this year. So that just removes all your potential plans right there. You are absolutely fucked if you can't stop the nigga from scoring. If you turn him into a passer and he can still process the game at an elite level to where he's not going to put the ball in harm's way. And that is the identity of the team in general. So all around, his game reads like it deserves an MVP award. And there you would have it. You're going to have to do a little bit more to take him down as an opposing player. Because the consistency matters, as well as the fact that, certain injuries are going to hold players back. I get all that. This conversation, it ain't even a question, man. It ain't even a question. So you can't be surprised. Moving on to the Pelicans, as they actually hired Jamahl Mosley. Yes, the recently fired Orlando Magic coach is now in New Orleans, and they signed him to a 5-year deal. Now, honestly, just thinking about this a little bit, my main thing with this hiring is that the regimes for the Pelicans are a little different, of course, with this one hiring Jamahl Mosley and the ones that they recently had before Joe Dumars got there, and they also let go of Bryson Graham and others. What is the point of signing Jamahl Mosley to a 5-year contract? What's the point of doing that almost immediately? I understand that there is something to be said about having a fair amount of job security in that role, but you are signing him to that long of a deal with how volatile the position can be, knowing the position that the team is in as of this point, with them being one of the worst in the NBA and holding a high pick in the draft lottery this year. Well, actually, not because of the Derek Queen trade. Right. So they are not in the best position right now, of course. That much is very clear. Yet, you want to know what happened the last time they hired a coach to a long-term contract extension? That would be none other than Willie Green, who Again, different regimes, yes. Bear in mind, when he was there, despite this Pelicans team being decent, at least for a couple of years, they then proceeded to, as the talent around this team shifted with the number of injuries and unhealthy players that they had on their roster, forcing them to become almost terrible overnight. They scapegoated this nigga, and they decided to fire him at the start of the year. They full-blown scapegoat. That's what Willie Green dealt with. Like, some of these things that were going on in this Pelicans locker room were not of his own doing. And yet they still made the decision, even as they had recently extended him. They said, we're just going to move on from him. And now you're running the same risk with a coach in Jamahl Mosley, who had literally been stuck in mediocrity for the past few seasons with Orlando. I just don't think it bodes well. You have to be smarter about that. Because you know how trigger happy you can get, especially if you're going to make that move to send Green away that quickly. When it looked as though, for a couple of years, that the tide was turning in New Orleans. And I understand that it is a what have you done for me lately league. I understand that things can change around just like that, but there's no way that you should have moved on from him that early. At least I don't think so. At the very least, he deserved far more leeway than that. The hiring itself is actually respectable. The jury is still out on whether or not Jamahl Mosley is actually going to be a strong defensive coach. And it's the same thing that I said when he got fired. Like, he wants that identity for himself, but all of the metrics, all of the different displays of execution on the court would suggest that that was far from the case in terms of him being revolutionary in that respect. This is another chance to prove it, and more than likely it's going to be a bit shaky in the first couple of years. From that perspective, it will definitely take some time to round this team out through all the rough edges and all of those kinds of things. They need a whole hell of a lot of work. Like, there's no denying that. But maybe Mosley can put himself in a position to get it done. You know, you have a lot of young talent that you're working with. And also, with that track record, compared to how the Pelicans have now been over the past couple seasons, as consistently one of the worst teams in the league, them being potentially mediocre under Jamahl Mosley, they take it in a heartbeat. I'm not expecting Mosley to come in and have a turnaround like that from Charles Lee this season. As he again had one of the largest win increases from one season to the next in all-time NBA history. I'm not expecting that from him. And even this is Charles Lee's second season. So it is definitely going to take some work and some growing pains in year one to get over all of these hurdles. But if he can even remotely capture some of that, then the Pelicans are right where they need to be. In no way are they championship caliber right now. They need to take as many baby steps as possible to get there. And that is the next best thing they can do. You have to start fostering a bit of a winning culture here. And Mosley has been a winner, at least over the last couple seasons, with a similarly young and I guess kind of overcrowded Magic team. Especially at the forward position. They do have a similar thing going on right now with their forwards. And I'd been seeing a couple things about that. So maybe those kinds of things get sorted out in the off season. But you've still got a lot of tools to work with. And of course, you can always bring in new talent over the summer. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge for Jamahl Mosley early on. Of course, he's not expected to be perfect off the bat, and frankly, he shouldn't be. I just would not, that would be a crazy turnaround to have him get fired from the Magic after consistently stagnating over the past couple of years, and then automatically turning this Pelicans team into a juggernaut. That would just be completely unexpected. But at the very least, if you can have marginal improvement going on with this team from a season-to-season basis, and you can also bring some of these young players along, namely the Derek Queens, the Jeremiah Fears of the world. Of course, you still have to balance what you're going to do with guys like Trey Murphy III and Zion Williamson as well. You could be in a very good spot. It's absolutely not a desirable job, to say the least. But the Pelicans were willing to pay him. They were willing to take another chance on him. When it looked like, honestly, I didn't think any team, was going to take another chance on him. This offseason, at the very least. So, this could be very interesting to watch develop over at least the next few months. And then as we get into the regular season, we'll be able to learn a little bit more. But Mosley himself, as a tactician potentially, maybe he isn't that. But he is going to have to work on retooling some of the very, kind of elements that exist and that he wants to incorporate mainly in his coaching style. Because those particular standards, whatever he was trying to do in Orlando, did not work. And the worst thing that he could possibly do, even though this team may line up in a similar fashion, the worst thing he can do is try to attack this coaching job the same way he did with this Orlando team. Because they are on two completely different timelines. At least on paper. So you cannot do that to yourself. Switch it up. Rejuvenate your game plan. Create better sticking points for these players to focus on and take away from all of these different meetings in the postseason and in these practices and in other training sessions. That's going to be vital as anything for Mosley to do in this situation. Moving on to the Mavericks, and they honestly had something surprising go down because they decided to fire Jason Kidd last week, and he actually had $40 million left on his contract. Those last couple things were stated by Shams Charania, of course. So yeah, that news broke, and this was literally breaking before one of the first games between the Knicks and the Cavs, I believe. So I'm like, damn, really? What? That's insane. And apparently he was not the only one to leave. According to this Bleacher Report article, quote, Mavericks executive Matt Riccardi is also leaving the franchise per NBA insider Jake Fisher, end quote. So Masai Ujiri is really, and you want him in a way to display that you kind of expect it from him. That's why he was hired in the first place. The continuity in those moves matter. The consistency in those moves, in the direction you're trying to take with this franchise matters. Even if, to me, on the outside looking in, it might not make a whole lot of sense. You don't want to come in and just have all these different sporadic firings without a true purpose, which Masai Ujiri has already made clear on several occasions. So, they may be cleaning house a little bit, but you can't necessarily blame him. Per Ujiri's statement, Quote, Jason has had a meaningful impact on the Dallas Mavericks, both as a Hall of Fame player and as the head coach who helped lead this franchise back to the NBA Finals. We are thankful for Jason's leadership, his professionalism, and his commitment to the team. In my short time here, I've developed an enormous amount of respect for what he has built. He will always be an important part of the Mavericks family, end quote. And so when you think about that, it's like he's saying all of these things about Jason Kidd now. Apparently, when he first got there, he was non-committal about whether or not he was going to stay. And there have been a lot of different things coming out about Jason Kidd. There have been multiple people creating all these rumors and saying that it wasn't true in that Jason Kidd had no knowledge of the Luka Doncic trade. In fact, there were some of these people out here saying that he was a major proponent of the move. In fact, signing off on the deal. Now, who am I to say whether or not that is true? All I can say in, response to that is gauge from what I myself saw in the very aftermath of that move. And I saw a man in Jason Kidd literally at the press conference following it, having this smug look on his face. Like he was going to beat the fuck out of Nico Harrison. So you're telling me that man who was trying so hard to be professional in that moment to not absolutely light this man up on camera, to keep himself as composed as possible. You're telling me this same man somehow had a full-blown part in sending Luka Doncic away to the Lakers all of a sudden. I do find that hard to believe, but it's worth mentioning now. Just to have a bit of insight into what the conversation is surrounding it. Whatever you think Jason Kidd had to do with it, though, there's no denying that when it comes to this team overall, and it's not to be any kind of recency bias proponent and say that this is one of the worst stretches for a team ever, like that would be false. You've seen so many worse ones from many different sports that have lasted even decades in some cases. When it comes to the last 17 months for this Mavericks team, they have mismanaged everything in the worst possible ways, as I'd already detailed. There is just no way that you go from a potential NBA Finals win, let alone the appearance in 2024, and you at least came away with a game, but you were there. And now in 2026, after multiple injuries to multiple core pieces, after multiple trades to send away the same exact pieces that were a vital part of that championship team, and then were set to be a vital part of this new era of Mavericks basketball, and a couple devastating ends to multiple seasons in a row, they now have all their hopes resting on a lucked out acquisition in Cooper Flagg coming to this team and trying to usher in a true new era of Mavericks basketball with no Luka Doncic, with no Anthony Davis, and with multiple question marks surrounding the likes of Derek Lively II or Daniel Gafford or Kyrie Irving, namely. Like, just a lot of chaos going on in these last 17 months for this team after getting that close. And that can happen sometimes, to the losers of a potential finals campaign. But not to that extent. Not ever to that extent. And regardless of what you may think about who was involved in the move or what, but hey, as I was kind of saying, like, you don't need to keep rehashing those points around that organization. If you truly want to bring forth the future. And as this quote from Bleacher Report article states, quote, according to NBA insider Mark Stein, the Mavericks won a clean slate under new team president Masai Ujiri. Clean slate. You can interpret that in a number of different ways. Namely, it might have to do with essentially just getting each and every single individual who was still there when this Luka Doncic trade went down away from the organization for good. Truly focusing on building a sustainable and truly communicative culture that can build around its superstar, potential superstar, talent, and face of the franchise in Cooper Flagg. Get a lot of working pieces around him and start to have people talking about the Dallas Mavericks in a way that has a more positive limelight and ring to it in what they are trying to do as potential contenders, rather than having the first thought in each and every single fan's and pundit's mind still be about the Luka Doncic trade and how terrible it was and how it was one of the worst deals, if not the worst deal in NBA history. If you ask some people who may fall to recency bias because they still don't understand how the fuck a person in Nico Harrison's position could make a move like that, even if you want to go out and call him fat and overweight. Just no logic behind it whatsoever. Like, that was one of the first things you consistently heard about the Mavericks when they were talked about on the debate shows, on the radio shows, on the different podcasts, all around the NBA landscape. It always started out with that qualifier. They could not escape it. And to their credit, especially when Nico Harrison was there, shouldn't be able to. But it is a distraction and served to be a very looming cloud hanging over all of their heads. Even when they fired Nico Harrison, the lingering effects of that move did not stop. They did not stop seeping their way into the foundation of this very team. And it led to them getting desperate in a way that you have never seen. So they needed to find ways to remove themselves from all of that. And as extreme as it might be, Jason Kidd was there when it went down, whether or not he was involved. So they found themselves in a spot where, okay, it's like we have to move forward from this. We have to. Apparently, there were, several different reasons for it. Namely, as this quote from the USA Today article states, quote, Kidd's departure clearly signaled that there was a difference in philosophy that newly hired team president Masai Ujiri wasn't willing to overlook. End quote. And as I've read about it, as I've heard about it on other videos, I guess that's something as well. Because it does all come down to how Cooper Flagg coexists in the grand scheme of things. Of course, Kidd ran this heliocentric point guard style play with Cooper Flagg that did force him into a very rough start as a rookie. He ultimately figured it out and finished off the season strong enough to become the Rookie of the Year and put together some of the most historic performances for a player who is only 18 and 19 years old. So, there is clearly something you have with Flagg in your locker room and on your team. But the that play for him, it worked individually with very little effort and help outside of him. Some of that due to injury, some of that due to just not really having as deep of a roster as you'd want. The team was not successful at all. I think their record finished in like 25-57, if I'm not mistaken. They were not good. So how do you now, if you're Ujiri, maybe his thought process is that, hey, we can still have Cooper Flagg do all of this stuff and be the number one guy. We need to build around him. We need to get quality pieces around him for the foreseeable future to take some of the burden off and ensure that even when Cooper Flagg isn't having his best night, that you have talent oozing off your depth chart to rely upon and go to work with. That's the key. And the Mavericks, they are going to need a whole lot. Of course, with the Kyrie Irving thing, especially, there are still a lot of different things to hash out. They do have the number 9 overall pick this year, so they're in a good spot. Ujiri has a great record of drafting well, honestly. But, when you get down that late, anything is up for grabs. So it's all about making the right move and seeing how exactly things fit alongside Cooper Flagg. That is the key. It's just about how his involvement will be shaped and will be crafted with potentially a new head coach now, and also for a good amount of the players here, a brand new team in some respects. Because running it back is not much of an option. And keeping things the same way as they were is not much of an option. Not at all. So you got to find a way to move forward. Now, from that standpoint as well, it is a question to, look in and see, hey, who exactly would they be trying to hire now? Frankly, I wouldn't have the greatest clue. But when it comes to some options here, CBS Sports outlined the defensive assistant coach for the Spurs and Sean Sweeney, Tom Thibodeau, the former Knicks coach and Bulls coach and Timberwolves coach, and also Nick Nurse, who was there for the 2019 championship in Toronto before being fired in 2023. Obviously, he's still with the 76ers as of the recording of this video, and they all, as I did not mention, when they let go of Daryl Morey, they did the right thing. Because that series, Nick Nurse probably could have coached a little better, but that shit did not fall on him. All of the very things that led Philadelphia to that point, in no way, shape, or form, fell on him and his ability to coach this team. So sticking with him was the right move. And they may still be trying to do it for a long time. So for all we know, even with them, outlining that name here, he could be out of the running, as far as we know. But, those are some options to consider. Whatever they do, it could be a very insightful thing to look at and try to monitor up to this point. I definitely expect them to figure it out at least sometime near the draft itself. So they may still try to stall it out. They don't need to be, like some of these other teams out here literally making these moves on the day that the NBA Finals, or an NBA Finals game is taking place and stuff like that. At the very least, sometime near the draft, you probably need to make your decision. Because even in that respect, even if you don't know who you're going to draft, you may be looking for a person that fits the mold of your team. And frankly, no matter who you hire, you will not have a complete answer of that. But you want to start somewhere. So you got to get that voice in there. Got to have a few meetings with this person to learn what exactly their goals are for this team moving forward. And then try to make something that blends, all of the specific preferences of the head coach, the assistant coach, the general manager, and multiple other positions that may have a say in who they take at the number 9 spot. Rough for Jason Kidd, though. It's crazy. Like, even if they want to say, yeah, he was 205 and 205, the context does matter. It is a what have you done for me lately league. He did not have the greatest win percentage after the Luka Doncic trade. But this is still a man who was just 2 years removed from the finals appearance. This is still a player who won you a championship in Dallas. Maybe on the back end of his career, but still played a very valuable role in it. And also had truly been one of the better basketball minds at that position. So I just, to move on from that early, even after that very recent success, it's kind of like, damn, are we being serious? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. That shit does not discriminate against anyone. Even a coach of Jason Kidd's caliber can be cast out to, do something completely different in the long haul. It's as simple as that. Other questions, rather, have been asked about, hey, where exactly could Jason Kidd end up now in this entire equation? And to be fair, one team that even as quite literally was looking at the breaking news take place, in my head, I'm already saying, you know what, hey, Orlando, they're out Jamahl Mosley. They're still looking for a coach at the time. They might want to slot Jason Kidd a call. In the same way that I mentioned that Jamahl Mosley had stagnated over the last couple of years and how he can potentially help the Pelicans elevate into a team that is at the very least relevant, maybe not necessarily full-blown playoff contenders, but at the very least relevant enough to get over 500. Well, Jason Kidd could potentially, with his mindset, be a person who can take that Magic team from point A, where they currently stand, to the next level entirely. Whether or not that looks like an NBA Finals appearance. Because he was just fucking there a couple of years ago. And while you don't have the same calibers of high-level talent, like Luka Doncic is, by and away, a generational kind of player, especially offensively. You don't necessarily have that in either of Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner, but they are definitely great franchise pieces to have. They're clearly looked at as the faces of that franchise. And although he may choose to run things differently, not in the same heliocentric manner, having him there alone, he could figure out ways to unlock both of those guys and potentially other pieces that they may add outside of the draft, because again, they lost their chance of getting a top 3 pick when they sent one of their first rounders over to Orlando for Desmond Bane. You lost out on that. But truly unlocking that defense for what it can be and having this team produce a little bit more efficiently from beyond the arc could really take them over the top. They just need the right system. And Kidd may be able to give it to them. Now, of course, there are other teams probably looking for Kidd right now as we speak. I'm sure of it. He is that good of a coach. He has that much of a track record. especially with what he was able to do with Cooper Flagg and what he was able to do with Giannis Antetokounmpo, turning him into the dominant player that we all know and love now, regardless of how things may be going in Milwaukee. So anything is on the table for him, really. He's earned that for himself. So we'll see what goes on there. But hey, man. Shit. Goodness gracious. That is genuinely tough, though. I'm not even gonna lie. But, alright. So, moving on now to some more general things after all those news. Because on top of the MVP award, they'd announced a few other ones, namely the all-rookie and all-defensive teams. So I'll get into the all-rookie teams. And for the first team, no doubt, you understood who was going to be on this list. Essentially, for a while, this made up the rookie ladder for the majority of the season. Between Cooper Flagg, Con Knoepel, VJ Edgecombe, and Cedric Howard from Memphis. All four of them had made multiple appearances throughout the year in at least the top four of the rookie ladder, updates that they had on a weekly, bi-weekly basis throughout the season. I think that Dylan Harper making the first team was a bit more recent. Now, is that a terrible thing? No. Not even remotely. Dylan Harper, in the regular season, put together a pretty solid performance of 11.8 points, along with 50% shooting from the field and 34% shooting from deep, along with 3.9 assists, as a 19-year-old coming off the bench in a San Antonio system that for that stretch of the season was quite literally one of the best teams in the NBA, having not lost back-to-back in pretty much 3 months, having one of the best records since February, and having a roster that could literally attack you in so many different ways from the floor. Harper played a large part of that. And maybe as they were going on this kind of run, media guys fell a little bit more in love with what Harper was doing as a player, forcing some other guys to drop out of that running and have Harper, with that stronger finish to the year, get up there. I would look at these things as a regular season award. Then you consider what the hell he is doing in the playoffs right now. And again, I can't speculate as to whether or not that had any involvement in it. But it's hard to look at what he has been doing now as a 20-year-old in his first playoff action, when he has gotten his number called. And he's been nothing but consistent for them in that role, whether he's been starting, whether he's been coming off the bench, giving them elite two-way play, especially as a slasher to the rim. It just hasn't slowed down. So you can view his inclusion on this list as that. Of course, Flagg won Rookie of the Year. Knoepel was the runner-up, in VJ Edgecombe with his season. A season where he also played exceptionally well. Again, the way I keep saying it, niggas really thought that this man was going to struggle to shoot the ball in the NBA. That was one of the biggest red flags in his game, weaknesses labeled coming out of the draft, was his lack of a three-point shot. Well, 35% shooting from deep in your first year ain't half bad. Ain't half bad at all. He also shot 43.8% from the field, while logging 16 points per game, along with 5.6 rebounds per game and 4.2 assists per game, along with 1.4 steals. The man could literally fill several different roles in the span of just a few games. On one end, he could be giving you a fucking 34-point night, like he literally had to debut in his rookie season. Or he can give you a night like he did in Memphis, hitting the game-winning shot and shooting exceptionally well from deep range, while being one of the more mature rookie players that you've gotten a chance to witness in quite some time. Very rarely do you see that blend. This man was just a freshman at Baylor, and here he is taking on all these different roles in the NBA and excelling at all of them. On nights where he hasn't even been the greatest offensive threat, he'll still be giving you top-end defense on a team that largely has struggled to do it, especially without having everyone healthy at one point of time. And what he's been able to do alongside Maxey does bode very well for their future if they hadn't already fucked themselves over by incurring that much money to both Joel Embiid and Paul George. Tyrese Maxey, again, has had his own noted struggles as well and has had some health problems, but when he's been healthy, there's been no question in regards to how impactful he's been for the 76ers team. Like, that's the guy. That should be the guy. And so pairing him up with Edgecombe in the backcourt proved to be something really special this season. They're going to look to keep building off of that as the years go on. And then Cedric Howard as well was also a consistent mainstay in the rookie ladder list. His season isn't going to get talked about nearly enough because, well, yeah, Memphis was just another team that was literally dealing with each and every single distraction in the book. But that does not take away from what Cedric Howard was able to do. And so we're going to give that love here. You know, he himself in 62 games played and actually getting starts in most of them had about 13.6 points along with 5.9 rebounds and 2.8 assists, along with 47% shooting from the field. Now, as a player who might be potentially sliding into, needing to be a little bit better from three, 33.8% shooting is a bit of a rough start, from the percentage standpoint. But those are shots that can potentially come for him with time as he continues to grow his game. And hey, that elite two-way play is something that the Grizzlies, depending on what direction they take, because again, they don't even know what the hell they're doing, right? They don't know. It could be very useful for this team as they try to take the next step forward, whatever the hell that may look like for them. Like, you just don't want to put Coward in such a vulnerable situation like that. There has to be some clarity on what exactly their next step is. That's going to be the most important thing. And while he had his draft rights traded from Portland, hey, he is doing as much damage as he possibly can with this Grizzlies team. It's only looking up for the lad. He's just 22 years old. So the chances for him to grow are still up there, while also being a player who seems to be more than ready to rise to the occasion, being one of the older rookies in that same draft. And then for the second team, you had a team consisting of Ace Bailey from Utah, Jeremiah Fears from New Orleans, Colin Murray-Boyles from Toronto, Massim Reynaud from Sacramento, and Derek Queen filling out the 5 spot, I guess, from New Orleans. All of these players, especially Ace Bailey, it took a little while for him to get going. He had his noted struggles as well on a Utah team that wasn't really great, but also trying to figure out how exactly to play around with their roster entirely. They just had no knowledge of that. And it seemed like Bailey had a strong close to the season. In 72 games played, he had 13.8 points per game on 44% shooting from the field and 34% shooting from deep. His athleticism is obviously off the charts. And the thing for him has been to make shots within the flow of the offense, which there were a couple games he just automatically took everything over. He is a player that, quite frankly, has a lot of potential at just 19 years old, being asked to command all of that, especially by the end of the season. It took some work to get there. You're still working alongside tons of other guards like Keontae George, and then you also have Larry Markin in the back end that you're trying to share the floor with. It's going to be tough to get touches that way. Once he got there, there were some shots where it's like, why exactly are you taking that? He was doing it at Rutgers. And so that's just a situation where he may be penalized. But all in all, that progress from when he first got into a game compared to the end of the season, it's something that Utah is very content with. Despite all of the different shit coming out last year about how he didn't want to be there and the shady-ass representation that he had. Thankfully, he got them niggas out of there because I don't know what the hell all that shit was about. Quite frankly. And, again, similarly, with him, more than likely, the way their team is constructed, there could still be struggles with him getting touches on the court. But as this Utah team may grow, they show a lot of promise. They have some good talent on their roster. As they grow, he can as well. Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen are virtually in the same boat. Like, they do have some pretty intriguing skill sets. The Pelicans are just not good. They're not. And both of them, when players are traditionally healthy, I don't know how viable it is that Derek Queen would really get as many starts as he did this year. You could make the same argument for, I guess, Jeremiah Fears being in that same position as well. I was not understanding of him getting the baby Jokic label, yet you could see it in bunches when he was on the floor out there, Derek Queen. So, from that standpoint, you could be in position to really expand on that. The thing is, he does play the same position as Zion Williamson. And so it's like, what exactly are you going to do with him? Where do you put in Eazy, a true five, in that respect? Unless you're trying to small ball it and have Zion Williamson remain at the 4 while Derek Queen plays the 5. Don't know if you want to do that because he stands at only 6'9". So it's tough for Derek Queen. Like, he can be a great contributor, but he is kind of in the same realm, honestly. And this is crazy to say, considering that he doesn't even have the same caliber three-point shot, shooting just 26.1% from 3. Of course, that can be improved as the years go on. But he may very well be in the same boat as a Nasri. In that, while he does have some of the skill sets you'd want to see in a starting caliber player, the team is constructed in a way where you already have your starting power forward. It's Zion Williamson for New Orleans, and it is still, as of the recording of this video, Julius Randle for Minnesota. Knowing that you're more than likely going to give them the reins when they are healthy and available, it does put Queen in a tough spot. Unless the decision for the Pelicans is to move on from Zion Williamson entirely, which there still hasn't been much of a word about to this point. That is very much up in the air. We have no way of knowing if that is what they are actually going to do. And so it puts Queen in such a tough spot. It's good to know that he still had the season he did despite that. And you love to see him make this team in spite of all that chaos. I just don't know where exactly he will fit if they want to run this back for the entire team. And that's before you even get into incorporating the likes of Trey Murphy III, who's going to start, before you even get into the likes of incorporating Herbert Jones, who is going to start as long as he's with the team. Although apparently there was a rumor that I recently saw, going back to that point, about him being sent over to the Lakers if they try to craft a trade centered around Jarrett Vanderbilt, Dalton Connect, and other assets, which could be very intriguing. I don't know if the Pelicans would take that, especially with what happened the last time. They sent away one of their focal points. In fact, the focal point to that team. Lakers got a championship out of it. I don't think they'd want to help them again. But that rumor is out there again. It's relevant to bring up. It's relevant to the point. You just have all those different moving parts. And you are actively now having 2 all rookie team caliber players on your roster. It's a very tough position to be in. Colin Murray Boyles, he as well might be, again, even with this being in the regular season, with me seeing specifically what he was able to do in the playoff run, I could very much understand why he made the list. You have another player here who is undersized at power forward even, and was sometimes playing small ball 5, yet he's doing what he's doing for this Raptors team in a limited role. Could you only imagine what he is capable of if he does get a chance at a maximized role with this team? It'd be fucking scary. Especially with the wing talent that the Raptors already have. And then Mazim Reino could turn into a legitimate 5 for that Sacramento team. But does everyone else around this Sacramento team want to be good? Similar thing. Too many moving parts at his position. One of the only reasons why he was in position to play all that much is literally due to the fact that Sabonis, in literally the first few days of the season, went down with an injury that ended his year entirely. The first few days, and maybe a week and some change, into the season, Sabonis is already out with an injury for the rest of the year. From, his time this season, he shot 57% from the field. I won't necessarily factor in the 3-point percentage because although at Stanford, he did occasionally shoot the 3 ball, that wasn't the focal point of his game. The 22-year-old Frenchman also averaged 12.5 points and 7.5 rebounds per game this season. He is also one of the older rookies in the entire NBA, but that is not something that you are too worried about if you are Sacramento. You have much bigger issues. No pun intended. And they need to figure them out. It's just going to continue holding a player like Reino back and other young talent back if they don't try to at least take a direction here. They are still, think about this. With a team that had Domantas Sabonis, that had Keegan Murray, that had DeMar DeRozan, that had Zach LaVine, they still finished as the worst team, one of the worst teams in the NBA, and did not get the number 1 overall pick. They landed at 7. And as far as we know right now, these players, all 4 of them are still there. You recently re-signed Keegan Murray to an extension just a few days into the season. And he himself also dealt with multiple injury problems throughout the year. As I said then, and as I'm saying now, you've got to change some of this around. At least 2 of them have to go. If not all of LaVine, Sabonis, and DeRozan. Because as constructed, you are literally still going to have to outscore everyone. You're just going to be able to put together decent offense that won't even match up to the best of them in the NBA, and you have no defense to speak of to counter what they're doing. It's just terrible that you put Reino into a situation like this. But yes, those are the all rookie teams. And for other voters, other players that got votes, they had Ryan Kalkbrenner, Trey Johnson, Hugo Gonzalez, Will Riley, Carter Bryant, Jaeger Joman, Sion James, Kasparas Yakuchonis, and Ryan Nembhard. I don't know how the hell Ryan Nembhard and Yakuchonis finished with a third place or second place vote each. How the fuck did that even happen? Ryan Nembhard had at least a stretch early in the year where this man was literally being trusted over Brian Williams. And he also, Brandon Williams, my fault, and had some pretty solid performances off the bench for a team that was still looking for point guard production with no Kyrie Irving on the court. He should have gotten some more love than that. Yakuchonis as well. Like, again, it's just more opportunities, right? It's not necessarily all his fault, but he did not play enough. He genuinely didn't. Sion James was more of a hustle player. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, it definitely helped the Hornets when he was out there. And his defense especially, being a senior at that Duke team, that same Duke team, that had the young freshman in Cooper Flagg and Con Neupel, he was still a vital component as to why they made the Final Four that season. So him carrying that over to the league in his position is honestly something that does deserve some merit here. Kalkbrenner is interesting. He himself, for a time, was literally shooting 90% from the field, and then that just completely tanked. I don't know. I just think that he as well would have to play a little bit more and be trusted a little bit more before he'd make this list. Trey Johnson is also just a weird fit with this Wizards team. Of course, they are the worst team in the NBA for a reason. So they have a lot to hash out. For a Tom, I think that Hugo Gonzalez, if he had played more, probably would have made the list for his defense alone. He was quite literally one of the more valuable defensive players in the league when he was on the floor for this Boston Celtics team. Will Riley is also an interesting character, but also stuck in Washington. Same for Carter Bryant. Probably also, if he would have been trusted more, due to his defense alone, would have made the list. And that's before you even mention that, hey, this was a player at Arizona still putting up great overall scoring output and making a deep March Madness run with that team before getting into the NBA. I think Jaeger Joman would have had the greatest chance of any to potentially make the list. But again, the Nets are just so ass. And yes, you're even saying this with New Orleans and Sacramento footing this, with Dallas footing this. Man, it also hurt him that he was injured as well towards the tail end of the year. So he wasn't able to really close out all that well as he would have hoped to. But yeah, watch out. Watch out for Jaeger Joman. Just watch out for him. That's really all I can say. 52 games is not the greatest sample size, and he definitely need to be more efficient from the field. That's also about, again, like allowing him to get downhill at times, allowing him to put up mid-range shots instead of just relegating him to be a fucking floor spacer the entire time. He most certainly can do it. He displayed it at BYU. It's just like, damn, bro. Like, let him actually fill out a decent role offensively. You have nothing to lose. As the Nets have now gotten even more picks in this draft. Like, you don't have to do that. Okay, all rookie and all defensive teams. We'll move on to that as well. Yes, they got these out now. And to go rapid fire there, they had Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren, Azar Thompson, Rudy Gobert, and Derek White make the all-defensive first team in the NBA. which in most cases you really wouldn't have a problem with. Victor Wembanyama obviously was the unanimous winner, the only unanimous winner in the awards history, of course. Chet Holmgren was the runner-up. Asar Thompson was the third-place finisher. And it makes sense with that being his literal strength on that front. There wasn't a world in which he wasn't making this. There wasn't a world in which he was making this spot. Like, he was going to get there one way or the other. Some people have had issues with Rudy Gobert and Derek White being up there, and honestly, going through it, seeing what I saw, I can understand. Because, honestly, like, Derek White, I mean, sure, you know, sure. He obviously has great defense. It's just that, I don't know, even with this being positionless, the fact that Scotty Barnes, who, I don't know where this came from, this might have been via StatMuse, apparently he is the only player in this decade to put together a 100 steal, 100 block season. And clearly, his defensive impact elevates the entire Raptors team. That's not taking away from what Derek White does as an individual defender. But when you see that from Scotty Barnes on a night-in, night-out basis, I don't know how he did not get a placement here. He was also apparently a top 5 finisher in the overall race. So I'm not all that sure about how and why he missed out on that spot. It made no sense to me, but I digress. With Scotty Barnes falling victim to that, though, he did lead the second team, along with Cason Wallace, a multi-time Defensive Player of the Month, Bam Adebayo, OG Anunoby, and Dyson Daniels. One of the top finishers in last year's running, and well-deserved was that. Which, really, on this list, I don't have much of a complaint about. Because you have to understand, when it comes to all these players, all of them, for the season, met the requirements and far exceeded them. Like, rarely did any of these guys miss much time due to injury. The only thing you could say about Cason Wallace is that he, in a good amount of the games, would not be regarded as a starter, but in games where, you know, for example, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Jalen Williams were out, he'd get the work done. And he started in a career-high 58 games this season while being a just on-ball, point-of-attack pest on defense. And this man is primarily coming off the bench, being asked to do far more, and still giving you that on a consistent basis. You just can't ask for much more if you're in the Thunder's position. If other players had been healthier, they'd probably land on this spot. But yeah, Holmgren and Wallace obviously round that out for the team. And then Bam Adebayo, I mean, you know, it's like he himself, again, has been regarded for years as an individual, a great individual defender, the defensive anchor of that team. It does help now that he can slide down to the 4 and have Kel'el Ware hold the back end at times. You could argue in a way that has potentially unlocked his ability to do even more damage at that role without having to be regarded as a 5 defensively. If only that carried over to the entire team. If only that carried over to the entire team. I tell you, man. Anunoby and Daniels are also two-way fucking freaks. Like, there's no denying that. At all. So, not really many complaints with that outside of, yeah, you know, like Scotty Barnes probably could have been elevated up. And then for other finishers here, in terms of total voting, you had Stephon Castle and Amen Thompson both log 46 total votes and just missed the cut. Just missed the cut. It's a great time to know that even in a time where defense may not be as valued, you have players as young as Castle and Thompson are respectively getting that love. Castle might be a beneficiary of a great season from the Spurs overall as a team, but the man was coming out with that defense from college. That was the strength of his from college at UConn as a freshman, clamping niggas. And he brought that into the league instantly. The conversation was never about what he could do on the defensive end. That was never a problem for Stephon Castle. And actively this season, whether he has been getting out in transition and running, whether he has been playing on ball, off ball, you name it, he has truly put ball handlers in jail on too many times to count. Far too many occasions to be overlooked. So I love to see him get a finish there. And then obviously Amen Thompson in the same way. You can't teach the fucking things that the Thompson twins are pulling off defensively. You just can't. It's difficult to. How the hell do you want a game plan for something like that? And then before you can even blink, they're all over the fucking court at one point in time, leaping fucking 40 feet in the air, trying to block your shot. There's nothing you can do about that. It wouldn't have been surprising to see Amen Thompson make the list. Now again, over any of these guys, if anything, you may take Derek White out entirely, and you may elevate one of these second teamers to first team to make some room for Amen Thompson. That probably would be the only way. Because those efforts commanded. There's just no getting around it. But nah, like literally, there's something to be said about, having these young players get that kind of love. Because both of these guys are 22 and 23 years old respectively. So, hey, like, even with everybody trying to come out and be a scorer, that defense, if you have it, it's going to be rewarded. You just have to trust that. And I'm sure that these are players that are going to be mainstays of this race for so much time. Because the qualities that they have in terms of being actual defenders paired up with the athleticism that they possess as defenders, it's going to be hard for anyone trying to bring the ball up the court or trying to score and get past them, whether they're guarding them directly or whether they're there for help. It is a nightmare trying to go up against them. And then for other finishers, you had Draymond Green with 40 votes, Tsumani Kimura with 28, Chris Dunn with 14, Evan Mobley with 13, Lucius Dort with 12, Jalen Doran with 9, Nehemiah Queta with 8, Jaylen Brown with 7, Kawhi Leonard with 5, Jaden McDaniels with 3, Donovan Clingan with 2, and then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jabari Smith Jr. with 1. You only get a good percentage of votes to work with in this pool. There's no way in hell that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would be tied with Jabari Smith Jr. with the same amount of votes in any other universe. There's no way. No fucking shot, bro.
No.
And then for the Social Justice Champion Award, they announced that to be Bam Adebayo. The award was named after Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it has been a thing since 2021. He actually sat down with Carmelo Anthony, the inaugural and first winner of the award in 2021 to, converse about how it came to fruition, the things that he was doing in the Miami community to uplift these, other members, whether it be the adults, whether it be the children, through outreach programs and things of that nature. They found it to be highly valuable overall. And you also had Harrison Barnes, Jaylen Brown, Tobias Harris, and Larry Nance Jr. finish as finalists for that. They mention here, per the presser, that there's also a $100,000 donation to a nonprofit organization for the winner. So you never disrespect something like that. At the end of the day, no matter who was to win this award, it's all for a good cause. All going to, in theory, the, right things to help out so many different people in this world and in the community in which they serve, potentially others, indirectly, by having this announced. And maybe it inspires other people over time to participate in some of the same things. That's the ultimate goal with an award of that kind. So there's not much like craziness there. All NBA teams were also announced recently, and this is where some things get very interesting. To go quick, the first team was Cade Cunningham, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, and Victor Wembanyama. I'm not gonna lie, Jaylen Brown probably should have been a first-team finisher, and I thought he was going to be. Now again, the back and forth, the league is out to get me. The refs have an agenda against me. I want an investigation into the last three to end off the series against the 76ers. The be quiet Stephen A, the fuck Stephen A. A whole lot of shit has been going on with Jaylen Brown right now. On the court, he should have been an All-NBA first teamer. I don't see why the hell they made that decision. That's the largest gripe that stands out to me here. In no way does that mean that these players don't deserve it. Of course, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander finished as the MVP. He's going to be there. And Jokic, Wembanyama as well. They were the top three finishers in the race. So that's a foregone conclusion. They'll make the list. Fine. Luka Doncic as well, for about a month, was averaging 40. And again, had to get a appeal from the NBA after missing time, both due to a technical foul suspension and the literal birth of his child. Once that happened, the second that happened, you figured that he was going to make the list with his on-court output alone. Cade Cunningham as well had a magnificent season this year. And the stock of his own as a player, literally getting a shoe deal in the early stretch of the season. And with what they were able to do, at least in the regular season, the stock for the Pistons entirely is going up. This season was not just about what Cade Cunningham was doing individually. This is about a city watching this team grow from literally one of the worst in the NBA just a couple years ago to instant playoff contention, holding the top spot in the Eastern Conference, even if it might have been a little bit weaker with some of the other injuries taking place. They held it down, and they made a killing out there on the court. Cunningham was a large benefactor of it, but man, that was the entire team rising up in making this happen. And so you have got to give some respect to that. It doesn't get much greater than that for Cade Cunningham. And I think with the contract that he already has, it's a large contract extension as it is, making All-NBA first team would give him a raise. And you bet that they are not complaining about it. For the second team, you have Jaylen Brown leading it, along with Jalen Brunson, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, and Donovan Mitchell. Especially with Kawhi Leonard, he was also very much in danger of not making it. Same goes for Kevin Durant. But with what they were able to do, with their careers aging like fine wine, as offensive juggernauts, and Leonard more for his defense, with them still being eligible to make the list, you're not going to pass up an opportunity to put them on there. With all of the other injuries that did take place, and with the injury to Anthony Edwards, with his appeal also not being rewarded for some reason. Like, if you're gonna, again, we're gonna pick and choose, like, okay, Anthony Edwards probably should have had his appeal met, but I digress. That opened up room for someone else. And Jalen Brunson or Tyrese Maxey would have fit here. I'm not complaining about Jalen Brunson being a second teamer. There's just not a need to. I would have more so put Donovan Mitchell down and probably slid Tyrese Maxey up. That might just be me. That may make me sound a little crazy. But I digress. The third team is a little bit interesting for some people for multiple reasons. You had Tyrese Maxey make it along with Jamal Murray, Jalen Johnson, Chet Holmgren, and Jalen Duren. And one of the main things that jumped off the table to me is that there's no room whatsoever for Scotty Barnes. In fact, looking at this, to spoil it just a little bit, how the fuck did he get less votes for third team and no votes for second team compared to Karl Anthony Towns? Are we being serious? I don't give a shit about Karl Anthony Towns not being on this third team. I don't give a damn. You're seeing what Scotty Barnes is doing on both ends of the floor, and you disrespect the man by not making him an all-defensive first teamer and not giving him an all-NBA selection at all? Y'all about to piss Darko Rajakovic off, man. He already told you he was all-star caliber player. And he's made an all-star team. He elevated that Raptors team to some of the most success they've had in years. And with him being a large reason for that, he doesn't get any ounce of credit. Now again, these are all players that it's like, yes, injuries play a large factor into them even being considered, with just how many superstar caliber players were out of the running because they weren't going to meet the 65 game rule. Maybe that's fair, but damn, you're going to pass him up like that over and over and over again? I mean, jeez. When does the buck stop? I mean, hell, if it's positionless, you could make room for Scotty Barnes in several ways here. And I'm not taking away from what these guys did this season. You could easily slide over a guy like Jalen Johnson to the shooting guard in this respect, and you could put Scotty Barnes on this list. You could take Chet Holmgren off this list entirely and drop Scotty Barnes in here. You could put Jalen Duren, if you really wanted to, off this list. And again, I thought that he belonged on the third team. So that's not what I would personally do. But even in this case, to make room for Scotty Barnes, dude, I don't think anybody would have a problem with that. And instead, he's just left off entirely. That makes no sense. I can understand him having less votes than Deni Avdija in this case. But I do think he should have made the third team. At least give Scotty Barnes something, because there's no way that he just leaves here with virtually no placement on the list at all. Even if you don't think that he is actually a top 15 player, you could make the same argument for a number of people here. It's anybody's game. And he still manages to fall short in the eyes of a voter. Now, again, the amount and the kinds of voters that get selected, some of them are randomized. Others, you're probably going to specific publications and choosing people. That much is fair. They must clearly not be watching enough Toronto basketball. Unfortunate as that may be. Because that's pretty much the only argument that you can make when you leave Scotty Barnes off the list. Just because he doesn't play for the big market teams out there, oh, he's just automatically not good enough to make an appearance on any of these All-NBA teams. What the fuck are we talking about right now? What are we saying? Okay, like, come on, that's delusional. That is delusional, man. Like, oh my gosh. Are we being serious right now? Y'all actually must be out of your fucking minds, bro. I tell you, man. But those things were interesting about that. For other players that got votes, as I mentioned, Danny Avdija with 26 and Karl-Anthony Towns with 14 points before you get to Scotty Barnes with 9. What the fuck? Why? What are we even talking about? You saw this man go for something like 20, 25, and 10 against the Warriors in overtime to win that game earlier in the season. And he had a number of performances like that, filling multiple roles for this Raptors team. But he does not make the cut as one of the 15 best players this season. I don't know about that. And again, maybe that's a display into just how much talent the NBA has. But I still think that is pretty glaring. Then you have James Harden and Alperen Sengun. Oh, people are not going to like that. James Harden and Alperen Sengun got the same amount of total points in placement with 6. LaMelo Ball and Stephon Castle each had 5 points. And Stephon Castle actually got a vote for second team. Again, that might largely be due to the success that the Spurs had this season overall. And it may take a little more counting numbers for Castle to get in that conversation of actually making a team in the future someday. But that defense alone has certainly put him in the running. If he can, at this point of time, get that close, just literally a couple votes off from making an all-defensive team. You best believe, as he continues to evolve as a player, while retaining that kind of defense, suffocating defense, he can be in the running for at least an all-defensive team. All-NBA might be a different conversation, but that is something to look forward to. Bam Adebayo had 4 points overall. Derek White had 3, and then Cooper Flagg, Brandon Ingram, and Evan Mobley each had 1 point in terms of all NBA team voting results. That is insane. Wow. So yeah, a lot of chaos there. At least enough to, still draw some ire from some people, I guess. But yeah, that will do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.